Which is better, Baldur's Gate 1 or Baldur's Gate 2? Alright, how about Pathfinder, Wrath of the Righteous, or Divinity Original Sin 2? What about Tyranny or Planescape Torment? The CRPG community seems to have a love-hate relationship with these kind of questions. A lot of people like discussing and arguing about them, but there's also an undercurrent of resistance to the debates. Like, there's another group of CRPG fans that are tired of hearing about it and think it's all just subjective anyways, so it's meaningless or immature to argue about it. Personally, I'm in that first camp. I love debating the strengths and weaknesses of games. I think it's fun. But I also think it's important when done right. In this video, I want to start outlining a framework for how to compare and evaluate CRPGs. Aren't games just subjective, though? It really seems like they are, right? We have a saying for totally subjective art forms. We say they're just a matter of taste. The image this saying evokes for me is of comparing ice cream flavors. I like rum raisin best, but my brother prefers mint chocolate chip. It would be completely illegitimate to say to him, "You're wrong to prefer mint chocolate chip. That crap is B tier at best." Rum raisin, on the other hand, is an S tier flavor, an easy top 5 contender for flavors. I can't say that because it's just a matter of taste. As long as you are enjoying the flavor you chose, there's nothing you can argue about. I think the reason we feel intuitively that games are also just a matter of taste is that, like ice cream, the point of a game is to be enjoyed. I might enjoy spending hours finding the strongest builds possible in a system, and you might enjoy spending that time imagining and customizing an interesting character. How can either of us say that what we enjoy is what makes a game best? Also, what we enjoy doesn't just vary between players, it also varies by time in the same player. Today, I might enjoy theory crafting the ultimate build, and then tomorrow, I could completely lose interest in that and enjoy character customization instead. With all of these considerations, it does seem silly and immature to evaluate and rank games. However, this is just one side of the argument. Let's set these questions aside for a moment and discuss the reasons I believe games aren't actually totally subjective and can be evaluated. This might seem like a cop-out, but the biggest reason that I don't believe games are entirely subjective is just that I can't force myself to believe it. I mean, I understand the arguments. I don't see any problems with them, but I find them completely unconvincing. And, what we believe isn't really up to us a lot of the time. I can't force myself to believe that 2 plus 2 equals 5, and I also can't really force myself to believe that games are entirely subjective and just a matter of taste. Probably the best way I can show why is with an example. Let's compare 2 games, Tic-Tac-Toe and chess. They are good games to compare because they are offering the same kind of experience. Both are turn-based, tactical PvP games on a square grid with no RNG. Now, if games are totally subjective, then these 2 games must be equally as good. But I just can't believe that. Tic-Tac-Toe is a worse game. How can anyone say otherwise? It's trivial to solve, and once solved, we see that it can only ever result in a tie, assuming optimal play. Now, I think the reason, if we're examining this instinct, the reason we're able to compare these 2 games is because they are isolating for that same desired experience. That is the experience of positional, turn-based tactics. If we compare chess to a different game aiming at different experiences, like say rugby, we're back to that feeling that it's just a matter of taste. So, all these thoughts lead me to presenting my first principle for game evaluation. We will call it the Tic-Tac-Toe Principle. It's this: when comparing games or mechanics, you must compare like to like. By like to like, I mean 2 games or mechanics which are roughly aimed at the same kind of experience. I have to say roughly the same because no 2 games aim at truly identical kinds of experiences, right? If we return to the tic-tac-toe versus chess comparison, someone could argue that it's not fair to compare them because tic-tac-toe is a game that you're supposed to be able to play anywhere, on the fly. Whereas chess, you need a board, pieces, a steady surface, a fair amount of free time, so they're technically aimed at different experiences. I mean, this argument is kind of correct, but to get around it, we could just reframe the debate with a little more focus. Instead of, which is better, chess or tic-tac-toe, we could refine it to, as a turn-based tactical PvP game, which is better, chess or tic-tac-toe. So, technically, comparing like to like can only truly happen once you've narrowed the focus to the mechanics and design aims that the two games share. However, I think we can recognize that games in the same genre probably share enough similar aims that we can compare them directly. But of course, on this channel, we are most interested in comparing and evaluating CRPGs. If I'm right about the Tic-Tac-Toe Principle, then to compare them, we need to have an idea of what the design elements and aims of CRPGs are. If we can't find any shared design elements and aims of the games which we consider CRPGs, then CRPG probably isn't an actual genre of video game. Luckily, CRPG really is a genuine genre. I think there are three broad defining elements of CRPGs. They are 1. A tactical combat system. 2. A story, narrative, or world. And 3. A system for character expression. And this is both narrative expression and tactical expression. In reality, these three elements are not very distinct, not as distinct as I make them sound. They definitely bleed into each other. For example, companion design. It's a massive part of all three. It's a part of tactics because companions are literally the pieces which you will use in combat. They're of course a big part of narrative and world design because they're characters in the story and world, and kind of the main avenue with which you explore the story and world. And finally, they're important to character expression because you will express your character in your interactions with them. So it's not all really neat and tidy, but I still think it's useful to think of CRPGs as being fundamentally a combination of these three elements. Okay, so I've kind of been chasing a lot of rabbits here. We've talked about why I think video games can be objectively evaluated and compared. We've talked about the core elements of CRPGs, but the point I'm actually trying to make is about this tic-tac-toe principle. So let's focus in on it by giving a concrete example comparing to CRPGs. And what I want to compare is actually specifically the character customization options between Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 3. So we can, I think this is a really clear example where you can see genuine improvement between two games. So this is, of course, Baldur's Gate 1. I am making a new character here. For character customization, you can choose your gender. You can choose a portrait. You can choose your race, which has mechanical but also aesthetic parts to character customization. You choose a class. Again, it's mechanical but also aesthetic. Then you get into appearance. It gives you a model based on the intersection between your gender and race and class selection. And then you can customize hair color, skin color, and then a minor and major clothing color. And then, of course, you can choose your voice, and then a name, and technically, you can write a biography backstory if you like. So you can edit this. And that's it. That's all of character customization in Baldur's Gate 1. But now let's compare that to Baldur's Gate 3. So here I am in Baldur's Gate 3. And you have all of the same options that you had in Baldur's Gate 1. Except now they're way better. So I can choose skin color just like before, but there are now more options. I can choose hair color, but again, there's more options. Now, and then you can also choose things that weren't even options in Baldur's Gate 1. For example, hairstyle. Eye color. You can select makeup, tattoos. And no longer is your appearance tied specifically to your class. I think anyone comparing these two features directly from Baldur's Gate 1 to Baldur's Gate 3 has to say that Baldur's Gate 3 offers an objectively better character customization mechanic than in Baldur's Gate 1. Now, does that mean Baldur's Gate 3 is better than Baldur's Gate 1? Not at all. This is just one area of comparison in a lot of areas of comparison. Frankly, character customization has to do with character expression. That's kind of the element that it plays into. And honestly, just the customization, like the aesthetic customization of your character, it's not adding that much, in my mind, to the broader topic of character expression. To me, character expression in CRPGs is really, it's not about variety of choices, it's about variety of meaningful choices. And what makes a choice meaningful is when it's recognized and supported in the mechanics of the game. Frankly, I think the gold standard for this is Obsidian's Tyranny, and the reason it's so good to me is because it does limit your options quite a bit. You don't get to play any character you can imagine in the world. You have to play the Fatebinder, and the Fatebinder has a specific role, profession in the world. But because they give you that starting off point, they're able to support a variety of meaningful differences. And to be a Fatebinder means to have a certain position on law and justice and power. And these are the major themes of the game. And in a playthrough, you get to choose your character's opinions on these things. And those choices are going to be mechanically supported. They're going to be recognized by the characters in the game and by the story. So to me, that's what I mean by meaningful expression. Okay, so that is the Tic-Tac-Toe Principle we've explored. I could end the video here to keep it neat and organized all around this one principle, but I'd really like to discuss another principle which relates to the most common mistake I see people make when they evaluate CRPGs on forums. And it does kind of loop back to what we discussed at the very beginning. The mistake is when someone just lists things that they enjoyed or did not enjoy about a game, and they think that amounts to an argument about the game. As an example, this is a debate I overheard on whether Pathfinder Kingmaker or Pillars of Eternity 1 has better companions. Just for background, the debate was between two friends of mine, Chad and Shathid. They were discussing a trend in writing of CRPGs, which I call the atheist paladin trope. It's a subversion of the classical paladin niche you're probably familiar with. Think of characters like Jantis, Keldorn, Cassavir. Basically handsome, upper-class white males who are fanatically religious, unrelatably devoted to their faith, and that faith is almost always lawful good with a capital L, right? That's the classic paladin. The atheist paladin is a trend of subverting that classic paladin character with one who is just as devoted, but to their own moral code. And that moral code is usually something opposed to the existing religious paradigm of the main story. To my knowledge, the first atheist paladin character was Kaelin from Neverwinter Nights 2, Mask of the Betrayer. She was a rebel angel leading a holy crusade against the gods on behalf of the faithless. However, in this discussion, Shathid was gushing about a different atheist paladin, Valerie, a character who centered more on saying something about gender and feminism than on religion. And here, Chad mentioned that if Shathid liked Valerie so much, then he should also appreciate Pillars of Eternity because of Pallegina, a character expertly designed to represent both the anti-religious parts of the atheist paladin trope and the feminist parts of it, in a setting designed from scratch to explore these kinds of issues. And this is where I got triggered, because Shathid was like, nah, I hated Pallegina. Pallegina is number one on my list of reasons why Pillars of Eternity sucked. I mean, Chad looked dumbstruck. Sweat was forming on his brow from the effort of trying to find some kind of charitable explanation for why Shathid would feel that way. After a few seconds, he just gave up and simply asked why, hoping but not expecting that Shathid would uncharacteristically make an insightful point. Shathid said, "She's just so annoying. She reminds me of my ex-girlfriend, and it's so grating I just can't keep her in my party for more than 5 minutes." The point of CRPGs is to be fun and enjoyable. Pelagina was neither, because she reminded me of my ex-girlfriend. So for me, Pelagina is a worse companion. Hopefully you can see Shathid's logic here. He's right that the point of CRPGs is fun and enjoyment. And it's also true that having a character remind you of something unpleasant is 100% going to kill the enjoyment of that character. But what he's missing is that there are all kinds of legitimate reasons why he could not enjoy a game which just aren't relevant to anyone else other than him. They literally just apply to you. I call this the ex-girlfriend principle. We have to try our best to put all of those personal opinions aside and just think from the perspective of the target audience. To see how the ex-girlfriend principle applies, let's return to the example of character customization. What is enjoyable about character customization? Well, I personally might like sarcastically making characters that look as ugly and inhuman as possible because I find it funny, in which case my favorite game is Elder Scrolls Oblivion. But of course, Oblivion doesn't have the best character creation system because the intention of character creation in CRPGs isn't to be sarcastic. Character customization is about allowing the player to write their own main character. A good character customization system will allow as much meaningful variety as possible that fit within the narrative and artistic themes of the game. That is fundamentally the target audience of that aspect of the game, so games should be judged on how enjoyable they are for an audience who is looking for that experience. Alright, so I think that's enough for this video. We have discussed 2 potential principles for evaluating CRPGs. They are the Tic-Tac-Toe Principle, that you must compare like to like, and the ex-girlfriend principle, that you should try to think from the perspective of the intended audience. I expect in the future I will think of more to add to this list. Ultimately, I think all of these principles stem from 3 fundamental questions which we should ask when evaluating games. They are 1. What were the designers trying to do with this game? 2. Is that worth doing? And 3. How well did they execute on it? Another core thing of RPGs in my mind is the experience of getting this group of friends together who support each other towards an epic goal. And you can get that in real life by joining my Patreon. This group of adventurers that I'm about to list have been questing, and the loot is the fantastic content that is possible when we can level up together as RPG consumers. So if you want to join that quest, consider supporting me on Patreon as this list of people did. Todd, Root 1, Aurelian, Marchitar, Soul Servant, Jason, Ghost Coast, Jeff. A special thank you to our newest members, Merrick and Carlos. We're excited to have you guys on board. And of course, a special thank you to the guy who started it all, CA Castaway. Gentlemen, I won't let you down.